Hey y'all, welcome back. This is video number 7 of our Astrology for Sovereignty series. This is about finding the focal points. But before I get into that, I'm going to quickly introduce myself. I am Mama Berry. I am the author of Foundations of Spirituality, a guide for the highly energetic, vigorously animated, exuberantly bustling brain. And I'm the owner and operator of thatmamaberrylife.com, which is a spiritual learning community. You can find us on Facebook, and you can check us out at thatmamaberrylife.com. We have a group for discussion on Facebook. We have a page on Facebook, so dig in where you can dig in, okay? There's also an intro video about me that goes into a lot more detail about who I am and what I'm doing, so you can check that out too, all right? Today, we are talking about focal points. We have already gone over the planets and the houses and the signs, a little bit about what astrology is and the history of astrology. Tonight is where we start understanding how we're going to move into the work. I'm going to show you how to find the focal points in your chart, and then next week we are going to begin to analyze. But tonight, by the end of this, you're going to leave with the assignment to go pull your own natal chart up and write down your focal points, okay? And then we'll use those next week to do the analyzing. Now, why are we talking about focal points? What is even a focal point? Typically, when we look at the natal chart, we are focusing on the big three, which is the sun, the moon, and the rising sign. Because of that focus, the rest of the natal chart really tends to get lost in the sauce. But the natal chart is a complete blueprint. It contains many moving pieces, and you really can't fully understand any one aspect outside of its relationship to the whole. That means that the sun sign by itself and on its own can almost be meaningless in certain instances. The native might express themselves more like their rising sign or their moon sign, or by the house that Jupiter is in. It really just depends on the setup of their nativity. It depends upon the strength and the placements and the connections in their chart. So that will look like sometimes, a Scorpio, and that Scorpio is not out there Scorpioing like you would expect them to, and it leaves you a little curious, right? A little confused. Like, that person doesn't act like a Scorpio at all. What's going on here? Chances are it's because that aspect of the native is not able to fully express itself because of the nature of the natal chart. And if you're just looking at the sun sign, you're not going to realize that. You have to dig in. So tonight, we're going to take a look at some of the ways that we can dig in. So traditionally, you start with the big three, and we will do that. But before we even go there, because most of us already know what the big three are, we're going to take a look at the whole chart, and we're going to see how we can pick out some focal points that jump out at us, right? So that we can include them as we analyze ourselves. And we want to include them from the beginning. We don't want to go through our sun, moon, and rising signs and say, oh, this big important point over here, I'm just going to forget about that. We want to just have them at least hovering in the back of our minds while we analyze what we need to analyze. The focal points are actually part of the planetary chart that I've already shared with you. We're going to use that table to fill out our own information. But first, we have to actually have our own natal chart. We have to look it up. There are a ton of great resources out there where you can look up your own natal chart. I like to use astro-seek.com because it offers a lot of different perspectives that you can use to analyze the natal chart as you learn and grow. You can go slowly, and once you get the big three under your belt, once you've kind of wrapped your mind around the focal points that you've noticed, you can go in and you can get AstroSeek's perspective on what else you can analyze in your own chart. But the first step is to look up your chart. And remember, you're going to need your birth location, your birth date, and your birth time. You cannot get your natal chart without those three things. For tonight, we're going to use what I call a sample made up, very not real chart. And I'm going to show you the chart on AstroSeek so you can see what it looks like. But I'm going to use my own program for the actual lesson simply because I'm more familiar with it. So real quick, I'm going to jump over to AstroSeek so we can take a look at that chart and see how to pull it up. I'll be right back. Okay, so we are here, and I just pulled a birth date and birth time out of the ethers. I don't know if it belongs to someone, or if so, who it belongs to. So it'll kind of preserve privacy. But for that data, I'm using June 15th, 1978, 3:37 p.m. in a place in Greenland. So you pull up AstroSeek, and it's astro-seek.com. And once that page loads, you come right down here to the birth chart. And then you can just click on that, and it'll bring you into the birth chart calculator. We are going to input our information. We're picking the day, which is 15. We're picking the month, which is June, and the year, which is 1978. And then we'll go to the time. The time is 3 p.m., so we have to scroll down. This is military time. 1500 is 3 p.m. And then we need 37 minutes. Now, normally, you just type your city in, right? So if you're born in Dallas, Texas, you can just start typing, and it'll pull up a menu. And then you can choose your city and state, and it'll put the coordinates in for you. I happen to choose a place that is not loaded into this program. It's called Sukkertoppen in Greenland, and it's not found. It says no city found. Please try the closest biggest city or enter coordinates manually. So if you go to the right here, it's tiny, hard to see, but you can click on the words enter coordinates manually, and it'll bring up this little menu. Now, you can probably Google coordinates. However, I happen to know what the coordinates are for this city because I have it in my personal astrology program, and I happen to have that pulled up. This is our sample made up, very not real natal chart. And if you look down here, it tells us that the coordinates are 65 north 25 by 52 west 53. So 65, 25, 52, 53. I'm going to bounce back over here, and I'm going to put in 65 for the latitude, 65, 25, 55. Oh, I'm going to have to go back and look because I forgot already. 65, 25. North, 52, 53. Okay. 52, 53, not 55, 53. All right. So the latitude is 65, 25 north by 52, 53 west. That was a west in between. So I'm going to change it from east to west. When I was looking this up earlier, Google seemed to suggest that you do not have to do daylight savings time here. So I'm going to just turn it off. Say not observed so that the chart calculates correctly, right? So then you click calculate chart, and boom, here you go. Easy, 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 lemon squeezy. We have a natal chart. This is what it's going to look like in AstroSeek. On the right hand side right here, it shows us all the information that we need, especially all the information we need for tonight: our sun, our moon, Mercury, and it tells us which sign it's in. It tells us what degree it's at. That, my friends, is how you find your natal chart. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I am going to minimize this right now, and we are going to go back to our focal point chart. So we pulled up our chart. Now we're going to take a look at our focal point chart, and you are going to understand what I want you to do in just a couple of minutes. Hey y'all. Hey. I wanted to just acknowledge that the scene looks a little bit different right now. It's darker, different clothes, different hair. I had to re-record part of that last video that I did last week. I was in a little bit of a rush and it was not as clear as I wanted it to be. So tonight we're going to finish it up and take our time and make sure it has all the clarity that is necessary before I release this out into the world. So if you remember, back in lesson 5, we were talking about focal points. And we created this table with all the information that's needed for our planets. It told us the characteristics of the planet, the archetypes of the planet, and remember, the natal chart is the script of our life, and the planets are the character in that script. So this table also helps us see which character the planets play in the script. We're going to use that table to write down all the information from our own personal natal chart and keep it handy as we study ourselves. So let's take a quick look at it so that we can orient ourselves to what we need to do. Okay, so this is our planetary roles chart. It's got all the information on the planets and the essential dignities, and this is what we'll be using to fill in the information for our own natal chart. These first 2 columns over here on the left, where the heading row is highlighted in yellow, that gives us the information on the planets. The name of the planet, its characteristics, and all of the information that we need to understand the character that the planet is playing in our natal chart. Then the essential dignity column is the 3rd column. That one tells us what the essential dignities are. It gives us a way to assign a points value system to them if we want to. It tells us what the house of joy is, and that's what we'll be using to do a quick health check on the state of our planets in our natal chart. Now over here on the right hand side, where the heading row is highlighted in blue, this is our natal chart. And we'll start simply by putting in our birth date, our birth time, and our birth location. And then you'll see right here where it says My Planets, this part is already going to be filled in for you on the template. So this says Sun, which means we're working with the Sun. In the 2nd column where it says Sign and House, that's where you will write down the sign that your Sun is in your natal chart, and also the house that it's in your natal chart. Here, in the last column where it says Health Check, that is where you will write down any essential dignities that you might find for any of the planets, and whether or not it's in its house of joy. For this 2nd and 3rd column right now, I have already filled everything in for the sample chart that we'll be using throughout this course. So in our sample chart, the Sun is in Gemini in the 9th house, and for the health check, there are no essential dignities for this particular Sun, but it is in its house of joy. So that's what I wrote down in this last column. And that's what this planetary roles table is. This is what we'll be filling in. Now that we have a place to write all the information down and a guide to make sure that we're looking at some of the most important points, let's get started by taking a look at our natal chart again. Now, I'm going to be using time passages on my own computer for most of the work because I'm just comfortable with that one. But I've suggested to y'all that you use AstroSeek because that's a really good website. It's a really good resource to tap into. So before I jump into time passages, we'll just take a look at AstroSeek again so you can see what it looks like right there, and see where you can find that information quickly and easily. So this is AstroSeek. We have it up. This is our sample chart. We have it up. And if you look over here directly to the right, that lists all of the planets and their positions. So the sun is in Gemini at 24 degrees, okay? Now, it doesn't say Gemini, it gives the glyph for Gemini. But if you want to read it, if you scroll down, you should be able to find where the sun is. So it gives some of the interpretations for the more important points, and then it gets to the sun. And it tells you all about the sun, and then it says sun in Gemini, sun in the 9th house. So on AstroSeek, you can find that information in those two places, and you can also figure it out directly from the natal chart if you'd like to. So back to the planetary roles table really quickly. We've already seen how we filled out the information for the sun. And you're going to just continue to do that for each and every planet in the table. So we scroll down, and now we get to the moon. I've already written down that the moon is in Libra in the 12th house. Now, I know that there are no essential dignities for this moon, because for the essential dignities, it says the moon is at home or domicile in Cancer. It's at its detriment in Capricorn. It's in its exaltation in Taurus, and in its fall in Scorpio. But the moon is in Libra. That is none of those houses. No essential dignities for this particular moon. It's in its house of joy when it's in the 3rd house, but it's in the 12th house in this sample chart. So we don't have any hits for the essential dignities on the moon. The moon is just out there being the regular moon in Libra in the 12th house, and there's nothing else stressing it at this point, right? Nothing else that we can see at this point that's making that moon pop out to us. There might be something else as you keep on going, but so you continue to fill this chart out on your own. Now, I want to show you time passages quickly, because there's a reason why I'm using this program. It's a really good program. The natal chart to me is just a little clearer, a little cleaner. It has this really handy feature where if you hover over any aspect in the chart, it will tell you exactly what it is. So if you see, as I'm moving my cursor here, that this bottom row, this bottom bar that's white, whoops, down here, this bottom bar, when you hover over something, it fills in with information. Right now, my cursor is over the sun, and it tells me in that bottom bar, the sun is in Gemini, 24 degrees, 17 minutes, 32 seconds in the 9th house, which is really handy. I can also click on that, and it tells me a summary of what the sun in Gemini in the 9th house means. Now, they aren't the greatest definitions in the world, but it's a start, and it's a good start, and it's very convenient. You can also see over here on the left side, it gives even more information. It lists all of our natal planets again. Sun, the moon, Mercury, gives the glyph, it gives the degree down to the second, and it lists more than just the planets. It gives us Chiron, which is an asteroid, gives us the nodes, our ascendant, our midheaven, the vertex, Lilith, the P4. These are all points in astrology that as you continue to learn and grow, you want to know where they are and you want to study them. So this program is one of my favorites for that. It has a lot of other features, but I'm not going to get into that right now. So once you're done writing down all of your personal information from your natal chart into this planetary roles table, this becomes a personal reference table for you. It becomes a reference that you can use to continue to study as you learn and grow. This is just a basic word processing document. So it's a table and there's room to grow. You can write anything you really want inside of these cells. You can expand the table, but it's just a really good reference document. And once you get your information in there, I'll show you how we'll continue to use it in this course. And now that we're done with that part, we can move on to creating a short list of the points that we really want to focus on. For that, we're going to go to the next table. Let me pull it up. Okay. This is the focal point short list, and here we see 3 columns: planet or pattern, why is it a focal point, and what questions might arise from this pattern. So we begin by writing down any planets that we found that are in their house of joy or have any essential dignities. Now, I probably should have said this from the start. I apologize a little bit for looking down so much. I had to figure out how to do this, and I am old and I do not do technology, so this is the best way I could figure out how to record tonight. I'm looking at my notes right down below the screen. So I'm here with you, I'm speaking to you, but I want to make sure that I keep this clear and don't go off on a tangent like I did last week. So I'm looking at my notes and I'm following them closely. That's why I keep looking up and down. Now, we are going to begin by writing down any planets that we found that are in their house of joy or have any essential dignities. So we'll start by the sun and we'll go one by one. And you can see that I've already, again, filled this chart in. I've already filled it in. And where did I get this information? Well, I got it from the Planetary roll sample chart. Here we go. So we started with the sun. And I looked and I said, oh, okay, the sun is in Gemini in the 9th house. Now, I transferred this over to the focal points chart because under the health check column, it says the sun is in its house of joy. If there's anything in that health check column, you want to put it in the focal point shortlist. So let's take a look. The sun is in Gemini in the 9th house. That describes the planet that I'm talking about. Why is it a focal point? Well, in the health check column, it says because the sun is in its 9th house of joy. So that's exactly why I wrote that down here. As far as questions go, don't worry about filling in questions as we go. I'm leaving that there because at some point in the future, this is a really good place to document any questions you have about any particular planet. So if you're curious about your sun and you have a random question, you come and you put it in this column, right? Even as you're pulling the focal points list, you can come and you can put questions in this column that occur to you as you're analyzing, and you don't have to stop and research the question, just document it so that you can go back and research later, okay? Once you're done writing down all of the planets that are focal points, you want to take a look at the natal chart. And from there, you want to make note of any patterns that you might see. And you might wonder how to do that, and I will show you. It's really easy. We're back in our sample natal chart. And what we're going to do is we are going to look for a few essential things. And I want you to remember that what we're doing right now is meant to give us a short list of things that we want to focus on learning more about and understanding in our natal chart. And these things are taking a priority role in our natal chart. There's something about them that is kind of spectacular and strengthens them or weakens them or changes the way they function inside of our natal chart. Changes the way they function from their normal, usual perspective, right? That's why they become a focal point. So if the sun, for example, is in its 9th house of joy, it's really happy being there. So it might function with a little bit more strength, right? A little bit more oomph. That's why it becomes a focal point. The point is, we just want to write down enough to get started. We do not need a comprehensive list of every single thing that we want to study. So we started out by looking for essential dignities and planets in their house of joy. That's what we wrote inside of our focal point chart. And when we go back, I'll show you what we found, but it was 3. There were 3 planets. That's it. It was the Sun, Mercury, and Jupiter. And now we're going to go down a list of what we're going to look at right here in our natal chart so that we can see what else pops out at us, okay? This is a visual exploration, and we're looking for patterns. So the first pattern that we're looking for is a concentration of energy. We're looking for a concentration of energy in any one house, meaning 2 or more planets or points in one house or sign, and you don't need definitions to find these points. You're doing this visually. In our sample chart, we have a concentration of planets in 3 signs: in Gemini, Libra, and in the 10th house. And we want to write that down like so. Now I'm going to go back to the planetary roles table and show you, but before I do that, there's a concentration of energy right here. So when I say we're exploring this visually, what I mean is we're literally just looking at it visually. We're looking for 2 or more planets real close together, in or near each other in the same house or sign, right? So right off the bat, I don't even have to look at the numbers. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 things inside of one house. Next house, 1, 2. The 12th house, 1, 2. So automatically Gemini, and then the 10th house, because these 2 planets are in different signs, one's in Leo, one's in Virgo, so this is in the 10th house. And then in the 12th house of Libra, we have a concentration of energy in each of those houses. And we will write that information down like so. First, the Sun in Gemini in the 9th house is down here because the Sun is in its house of joy. Mercury's in Gemini in the 9th house because Mercury is in domicile. So that's a pretty hefty essential dignity right there. It's in its home. It's going to function with a lot of strength. Jupiter's in Cancer in the 9th house. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, so it's really happy there. It's got a little oomph. It also naturally rules the 9th house in the zodiac. So that's kind of like 2 points for Jupiter, right? Now, those were the first things that we found when we looked over essential dignities in the house of joy. The next thing is we're looking for a concentration of energy. So we have a concentration of energy in the 9th house. And what that looks like is the Sun, Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus, and Lilith are all in the 9th house. The Sun is in a close conjunction with Mercury at 24 and 25 degrees. What I mean by that is this. Exactly what I said. The Sun is at 24 degrees and Mercury is at 25 degrees. They're right next to each other. They're on top of each other. The Sun is burning Mercury up. That's called a conjunction. Now, you do not need to know what a conjunction is or that the word conjunction exists to note the pattern that not only do we have 5 points and or planets inside of this one house, the 9th house, the Sun and Mercury are also super close together, 24 and 25 degrees. Now, we're going down to that concentration of energy in Libra. Libra is really strong in this chart. There is a concentration of energy in that sign and house. Why is there a concentration of energy? Well, the Moon and Pluto are conjunct. There's that word again, right? You don't have to say conjunct, though. You can just write down, hey, the Moon and Pluto are really, really close together by degree in the sign of Libra. So you want to use kind of an orb of around about 5 degrees. So if you see planets within 5 degrees of one another, that's when you want to make note that, hey, these planets are really close together in the chart. You don't need the definitions right now or the meanings or the words, just very basic foundational language. These planets are super close together, right? So the Moon and Pluto, they're conjunct, and that's in Libra. And then the rising sign and the moon are both in the sign of Libra. When we talk about our big 3, that's our sun, our moon, and our rising sign, our ascendant, right? The big 3 are called the big 3 because those are the core of who we are, and how we react and respond in this world, and how other people see us. So, the moon is one of our big 3. The moon is in the 12th house of Libra. Our ascendant, our rising sign is also Libra. That's a double Libra, and up here it tells us that in the corner. Libra rising, Libra moon. And thus, on our chart, we put the rising and the moon are both in Libra. So that describes the information for the concentration of energy in Libra. And then we have that concentration of energy in the 10th house, which is Mars and Saturn. They're in a distant conjunction. Don't need the language. Mars and Saturn are within 5 degrees of one another in the 10th house. Or you can write Mars and Saturn are very close together by house, not sign. Okay? They're close. That's all you need. That makes these 3 houses and these particular planets something that we are going to want to know more about sooner rather than later. It bumps their priority up on the list. Okay? So, the first point was looking for the concentration of energy. The second point we kind of went over already. It's looking for stelliums and conjunctions. Basically, in layman's terms, you're looking for things that are super close together. 2 or more things that are super close together in the chart. And again, what that looks like is this. The Sun, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus. In this configuration, the Sun and Mercury are conjunct because they're within at least 5 degrees of one another. Now, sometimes some people say 10 degrees is close enough. Sometimes some people say it can only be 1 degree away. But it really depends on the planets that are involved. So I'm saying 5 just as a general rule, but that is not a hard and fast rule. The point is, for our purposes, for this chart, we're using 5 degrees. So the Sun and Mercury are conjunct. They have combined energies. That's how close they are. They're twins. They have become one. Jupiter and Venus are simply there in the same house. Not the same sign. They're in the same house. Different signs, same house. So, can we call this a stellium? A stellium is when there are 3 or more planets that are very close together by degree. And they don't have to be in the same sign. They carry more energy and more power when they're close together in the same sign and house, right? They don't have to be, though. And we have an example of that in this chart with Saturn and Mars. They're within 5 degrees together. They're in the 10th house, but they are in different signs. Mars is at 0 degrees of Virgo, and Saturn is still hanging out 5 degrees behind in Leo, right? But they're within 5 degrees of each other. I consider this a conjunction, a distant conjunction, and a lot of astrologers would, because Saturn is a slower moving planet, but Mars is fast, and Mars is hot, and Mars is high energy. So if they were 2 slow moving planets like Saturn and Neptune, 5 degrees away, I don't know that I would consider it a conjunction, but for these 2 planets, I do. So that's an example of a conjunction when they are in different signs, but they're in the same house, right? So the second thing we're looking for are stelliums in conjunction. The last one we found was over here with Pluto and the Moon. Again, Pluto's real slow, but the Moon is really fast. So, 3 degrees away from each other, not even 3. They're 2 degrees away from each other, and the Moon is fast. That's a close conjunction, okay? Now we found the concentration of energy. We see where it is in our chart. While we were looking at that concentration of energy, we also accidentally, on purpose, picked up stelliums and conjunctions. And just in case we missed any, step 2 was go back and look for those again, right? Step 3, we're looking for planets on the angles. What does that look like? Well, in this chart, we don't have any. These are the angles. The angles are the 1st house, the 4th house, the 7th house, and the 10th house. These are angles. These are points of power in the natal chart. They're super important. They're points of activity. They're points when important things happen in our lives. So the 1st house is the house of self. If you have any planets within range of the degree of your angles, you want to make note of that. So this says 22 degrees Libra. That tells us that our rising sign is at 22 degrees. So any planet that's within 17 to 27 degrees in Libra is going to be conjunct our ascendant. it's going to be on an angle. That's what that means. The same goes for the 4th house, the 7th house, and the 10th house. So you can see we don't have any planets hanging out anywhere near these angles in our chart. But if you do, you want to write it down. The next point that we are looking for is a concentration of energy or a link in the big 3, the sun, moon, and rising. So in our sample chart, the sun, the moon, and the rising signs are stronger than usual. And the reason why I say this is for a couple of reasons. Number one, our sun is strengthened because it lives in its house of joy. And number two, the moon and the rising sign are both in the same sign, Libra. And we don't know yet whether that makes them stronger together or not. We just know that that puts an emphasis on them. So the patterns that you're looking for here would be anything like what I've just described, like if your sun, moon, and rising sign are all in the same house or they're all in the same sign. Whew, that's quite a concentration of energy. So that's the next point, point number 4. Point number 5, if you have one sign that is on the cusp of 2 houses, that's something you want to write down. So what does that mean? Okay, well, you see Libra right here. Libra is your rising sign, meaning it rules your first house. It is your first house, right? But if we back up here, Libra is also on the 12th house cusp. Well, if the houses are all equally 30 degrees, how is it possible for one sign to cover 3 houses, right? Because we're back here, Libra starts in the 11th house, covers the 12th house cusp, goes all the way through 12, covers the first house cusp, and then ends somewhere in the first house. That is called an intercepted sign. And if you look, the houses are symmetrical. So you're never going to just have one. They come in pairs. So Libra is covering 3 houses. When you look to its opposite sign of Aries, Aries is also covering 3 houses. So I said it comes in pairs, right? That's the pair that covers 3 houses. But the actual intercepted sign is the sign that is completely encased and entrapped inside of one house. And that right here is Cancer. So what we do on one side, we do on the other, symmetrical, right? So Capricorn down here is also enclosed in one house. What that means is, back up here with Cancer, we have Gemini on the 9th house cusp. And there's somewhere in the middle, we've got Cancer, and the entire sign of Cancer is inside of the 9th house as well. And then Leo starts in the 9th house. So we have 3 different signs inside of the 9th house. Gemini is functioning as it needs to. Leo is functioning as it needs to. Cancer is kind of trapped. Same goes for Capricorn down here. We're not going to get into what they are or how they impact the native, but that's something you want to write down on your focal points list, because that can have a big impact on how somebody responds and reacts in this world, or their ability to access the archetypes and the characteristics of the planets that might be enclosed inside of these intercepted houses, which includes Jupiter, and it includes Venus in this particular case. So again, not focus too much on definitions or what are all these things, but that they are. You look for them and you write them down. That is the goal. Look for all these things, write them down. Look for them, write them down, okay? Number 6, if you have a lot of planets or most planets that are either above or below the horizon, you write that down. So in this chart, there are a lot of planets above the horizon. Most of our planets and points are on top. Or if we see that most of them are on the bottom, because this is the equator line, right? So either above or below the equator. If there's a concentration of energy, a collection of planets that's out of balance, we want to make note of that. Same thing with the horizon. So if we have a concentration of planets over on either the left side the Eastern Hemisphere or on the Western Hemisphere, on the right side. And, we have our dividing line here. We want to make note of that and write it down. You can also note whether or not your natal chart makes a pretty little picture of some kind of pattern. Now, there are patterns that are already designated in astrology, and many programs will tell you what they are. One of the reasons why I love AstroSeek so much is it really gives a lot of details about the patterns that you can find in your natal chart, and it gives you good explanations on what those are too. And in this program right here, we're not going to bounce over to AstroSeek right now or look at that, but right here it says chart patterns, type, bold, leading, sun. So it's telling you that there's some kind of planetary pattern in here that looks like a bowl, and it's being led by the sun. That's important. Do not need to know what it is, but if you feel led to, look these up and write them down. Patterns are not really something that you want to start off investigating, but again, this focal point chart is to write down all the meaty stuff to help you prioritize the list so that you're not going over things that are not going to have as much of an impact on your behavior as these prioritized points would. Does that make sense? Also, remember, we are not doing this for a comprehensive list. We're doing this to get enough information to start with. So you don't necessarily even need to write everything down right now. For instance, let's go back for a moment to our focal point shortlist and just take a look at what we found from step one. We looked at the essential dignities. We did a health check on our planets. We found not only their essential dignities, but their houses of joy, right? We came up with 3 planets. That's enough to get started. Going through that entire list of 8 points that kind of cover the important spots, what happens is you end up with a short list just like this that gives you a whole overview of where you want to start. It also allows you to dive deeper into any one planet that appears on this list. And on this list, we have our sun, and we have our moon, and we have our rising sign. So what that means is when you begin to analyze your sun or your moon or your rising sign, you are already going to know that there is something about them and their placement in your chart that makes them function slightly differently. So you're not just going to look up the sun in Gemini. You're going to look up the sun in Gemini. You're going to look up the sun conjunct Mercury. You're going to look up the sun in its house of joy. That gives you a much more complete picture of how your sun functions and what your core nature is supposed to be based on all of these focal points that we pulled up. Does that make sense? So the point of what I'm saying right now is you don't have to fill this whole thing out. If you come up with 3 focal points and that's where you want to stop, you can. My suggestion is go through all 8 points and write it all down and then start at the top. Or start with one of your big 3. Start wherever you want, honestly. But this is your priority list. So you can pick a point from here, pick one planet from here, and begin to study. But study it within its connections. So study it in relation to anything it's connected to in this focal point list. And then expand the study of that planet from there. So that is the end of the lesson. If you complete the planetary roles table, if you fill that whole thing in, which really truly shouldn't take more than 10 minutes, if you then go back through and complete your focal point short list, which might take 30 minutes, maybe it'll take an hour, but you can do 1 point a day, right? So give yourself a week to complete it. If you complete those, you will end up with a resource list that tells you what the characteristics of the planets are, where your planets are by house and sign, and whether they have any essential dignities. From that, you can create this focal point shortlist that tells you what you should start to study. Does that make sense? That's what you will end up with at the end of this. I will give you the blank templates so that you can fill in the information for this shortlist, and so that you can use the planetary roles table to fill in your own natal chart information. And I really hope that this was a useful lesson. This was our lesson for last week. It will likely be our lesson for this week as well. And we will just see how things go and who shows up and what the questions are. As always, I'm available for questions in the group. You can drop them in. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. You can message me. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. But really, the best place to catch me is during our live Zoom session on Thursday nights at 7:30 p.m. And I truly hope to see you all there, okay? Make sure you try and fill at least some of this out. So, until next time, remember, find your passion, connect to your soul, and go get your whole life. All the love, all the time, peeps. I'll see you on Thursday.